Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our program with our guest speaker, Professor Jane Laitos from the University of Denver. It is my tremendous pleasure to welcome you all this morning. And I'm Aubin, and I'm going to say a few words about the program. About our program, which is funded by the European Commission through the H 2020 and Mercury actions. So every month we convene guest speakers to address different challenging issues in energy, environment, and natural resources. So our series will feature on November 22nd, Professor Lisa Sachs from Columbia University on the role and implications of international investment law for energy, natural resources, and climate. Feel free to visit our website, www.law.uh.edu/INAR Center. Now I'll turn it over to Professor Tracy Hester, co-director of the INAR Center and our chair this morning.
And good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to see all of you, electronically at least. As Aubin has mentioned, I'm Tracy Hester. I'm a professor at the University of Houston Law Center, and currently at this point, one of the co-directors for our Environment, Energy, Natural Resource Center, as well as a separate center for carbon management and energy and working towards a carbon pivot. In that regard, I wanted to fulfill my duties today, which is to welcome all of you and also to emphasize Aubin's invitation to join our future lectures and to introduce our speaker this morning, who it's a great treat to have. Jan Laitos is going to be speaking us today about his book on how to rethink environmental law, which is a topic of great interest to me, in particular, since we've been skirmishing over this and trying to think of whether there's a restatement of environmental law that might be somewhere in the future. Jan brings a long and distinguished history and background. He is the Joe Juhan Endowed Professor of Property Rights and Policy at Sturm College of Law at the University of Denver. He's also was the director of their Environmental and Natural Resources Law Program, which, as we all know, is one of the most highly ranked and nationally prominent programs in the country. And also previously had been a law clerk at the Colorado Supreme Court for the Chief Justice there. As someone who's teaching water law, I can tell you that the Colorado Supreme Court is a very interesting institution and is doing some very creative stuff. And we also worked in the Office of Legal Counsel within DOJ, which is, we all know, is part of the brain trust for that entity. So with that, we will be taking questions, preferably by chat while Jan is speaking, and we'll try and curate those. We'll also have a live Q&A session once he's done. And our goal is to be done by 1 hour, which would be 10 o'clock Central Time. So with that, Jan, the microphone is yours.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the invitation. I do have to do a quick full disclosure to you all about my connection to your center there. Many years ago, one of your esteemed professors, who I believe is on senior status, emeritus status now, Jacqueline Weaver, she and I were trustees at the Rocky Mountain Mineral Law Foundation for years and years. And she and I conspired at one point to see if maybe I could lateral to the University of Houston Law School and actually assume, I think, maybe the position you're in right now, Tracy, because that was open and she thought I would be a good fit. And I did some investigation myself about the center, and we proceeded fairly far along. And I have to tell you, I was so impressed with what the Houston Law School and the center were interested in doing, and where they were exploring to go into the future. And the only reason why I didn't transfer was because I had a dean who refused to let me go, basically, who essentially, what would be the word, made me an offer I could not refuse. And so I was stuck at the University of Denver for the rest of my natural life. But I have always wondered if that was an opportunity that would have been an interesting experience for me. And here I am many years later speaking to you. So anyway, I have a long history with you folks vicariously, and it's nothing but being impressed with what you have accomplished and the reputation that your center has around the United States as well too. In many ways, our program here at Denver is trying to emulate what you folks have done at Houston. So I'm honored in many ways to be invited to speak with you today. So my I guess presentation today involves a question that I had that I think in some ways is a question that your center and individuals where you are probably having as well too. And it's almost a conundrum or almost a paradox that has arisen in this country, which you're all familiar with. And let me just lay it out for you. And the question really involves the history of environmental law. As I remember very well, and is true as a matter of historic fact, there was no environmental law until the 1960s, until the very end of the 1960s. It was not taught in law schools. There were no case books. It was not a separate discipline. It was basically a field that was invented. It was invented by law professors and policymakers in the 1950s and 1960s. And it was invented because we, as a country, realized that there was a real issue we had in this country, and it was an issue called pollution. And the pollution that was happening with respect to the air and the waters really got our attention. It took us, centuries to figure it out, but until the 1960s, we didn't do much about it. But in the 1960s, as we all know, is when the federal government and many state governments became involved with addressing this problem of pollution. So we had this history of essentially realizing there was an environmental problem. In this case, the environmental problem was pollution. And then collectively, as a state and as a nation, we enacted laws to try to address the problem. And a series of statutes were enacted, and agencies were created, like the Environmental Protection Agency. Their sole purpose was to basically, let's fix this problem of pollution, air and water pollution. And that was the state of affairs for maybe 10 years or so, when we realized there was another environmental problem. And that environmental problem involved toxic and hazardous waste. And that involved land pollution and underground pollution as well. And what do we do about that problem? That's the Love Canal problems and all that. Well, the answer, of course, when you have a problem like that is, well, let's turn to the law again, and let's come up with more laws. And so there's a whole history of federal laws and state laws being enacted, and they have names like CERCLA, RCRA, TSCA, FIFRA, all these federal statutes addressing another environmental problem. And that was in place. These were all risk assessment and risk-based laws that were enacted back in the day. And that took place over the 1980s into the 1990s. And then as we moved towards the end of the century, as we moved into the 21st century, we began to realize, well, there's yet another problem that is out there that we haven't seemed to address. And that is, it seems like we are in some ways altering the climate. We're altering the temperature of the planet. And what are we going to do about that? How are we going to handle that? That was like something that was slowly percolating through the academic world and through the policy world. And when we began to realize it was a Earth-based problem, not just a localized pollution problem, there was again this magical, well, let's get some good laws out there to try to address this problem of carbon-based, carbon-caused issues of climate change, global warming, what have you. And a series of laws and more likely proposals to have laws were suddenly rising to the forefront of academics and policy making. And we had inventions like, well, why don't we create a cap and trade system where we put a cap on the amount of carbon in the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and try to, ratchet it down by having individuals have the ability within a cap to lower the amount of carbon. We even had a bill enacted by the United States House of Representatives in 2009 when President Obama was elected that actually did that. And many countries have tried to do the same thing. And then we got even more sophisticated. We came up with full disclosure laws. Let's disclose what we are doing and how our activities are affecting the amount of carbon and what's going on with climate change. Let's impose those on us as well too. And then we proposed laws that had to do even more exciting laws, or at least proposals. Many of these were never enacted, such as why don't we put a carbon tax out there so that will tell us exactly what the cost is of using carbon. And then even more creative laws were thought of, and this is in the 21st century. Laws like the Cass Sunstein, Richard Thaler nudge idea. Let's come up with opt-in and opt-out possibilities as well. And exciting, creative ideas to try to address this problem of climate change. And that was, hot stuff, 2010, 2015. And then we arrive at today, 2021. And what's the status of our environment in the year 2021? And I don't have to tell you what the status is. We are all going to hell in a handbasket right now. It's turned out that we are now in a position where, for the first time since Homo sapiens walked upon the earth, we are engaged in activities which, if continued, appears to basically be a very fast track to the end of our species. That we may, in fact, be over as a species on this planet within 100 years if we don't do anything to stop our desire, our fierce race to destroy ourselves. Because we are not, in the year 2021, just causing pollution. What we are doing now is literally changing the life systems that have allowed life to exist and Homo sapiens to evolve. And we did it to ourselves. That's why we're now in not the Holocene, but the Anthropocene era. And if that's the case, and we did it to ourselves, and it's not getting any better, in fact, all readings are it's getting worse, well, then the question is this finally a problem that we can't solve? We have finally arrived at a problem that is unsolvable. There's nothing we can do to fix it. It is absolutely an intractable, unassailable, cannot ever address this problem successfully. Is that what's going on? And I hope not. And maybe the other answer is, well, maybe we never really addressed it. We never passed any laws to address environmental issues. But we know that's wrong. I mean, we have thousands of courses in environmental laws throughout the United States and throughout the world. There are textbooks, there are case books, there are law after law after law, there are administrative agencies. It's endless. We have law professors writing and pontificating and putting all kinds of literature out there as to how to fix things. I mean, even this talk that I'm giving right now, this is not even, it's not just a book that was just published like a month ago. It's also going to be a law review article in the George Washington a Journal of Energy and Environmental Law. And I'm just one of the hundreds of professors that are, solving the problems of the world by coming up with great ideas with more laws and what have you. But none of it's working. I mean, that's my bottom line. That's the paradox. None of it seems to work. We're failing. And the failing is not just, well, bummer, because we're going to have a bad world out there. No, bummer, we're going to lose our species if we don't do something about it. I mean, this is serious business. And so what drove me to actually try to think through this is, well, why? Why have our laws, all these laws that we have, why are they not working? Why are they not doing the job? Why are they not fixing this problem? We've known about it in some way since 1960s. And here we are, multiple years later, and it's worse than it ever was before. It's not for lack of trying. We have great minds in the academic world, great minds in Congress, great minds on state legislatures trying to address these problems. Nothing seems to work. And I'm looking at Glasgow, as I'm sure all of you are as well too. I'm not sensing a great breakthrough there either, which is going to solve our problems. And that was preceded by the conferences in Rio and in Kyoto and in Paris, and that certainly brought the issue to our attention, but didn't solve the problem. So my argument, or my conclusion, my recommendation, was maybe the problem is that this is not an unsolvable problem. This is not for lack of trying. It's because we have been using, for lack of a better word, an algorithm, a set of instructions that we consistently rely on when we turn to legal solutions. And we've been relying on an algorithm that may be wrong, may be built on a poor foundation. And perhaps what we need to do is change the algorithm. Perhaps what we need to do is alter the assumptions we have had when we built the algorithm that essentially was the basis for all these environmental laws, or many of the environmental laws that are now in place. So then the question is, well, what is this algorithm? What is it exactly that we have relied on with all these thousands of laws that have basically become the basis of environmental law? So I decided to try to come up with some themes that are representative of how we have come up with false premises about how we should fix this problem involving our environment. Here they are. Here's the algorithm, and here's some of the issues that I think are problems with the algorithm. And then at the end of this discussion, I will offer an alternative algorithm that may have a better chance of success. So here's my conclusions about the algorithm we've been using. Number one, it is an algorithm that has been based on the concept of separation. Separation seems to be the lodestone for how we perceive existence. And by separation, I mean the following. We have presumed that the components of nature, all the components of nature, everything that makes up the elements of nature, are in fact separated, and they are not working together in any way. They're basically separate, and what they are tending to do, if we leave them alone, is to achieve some kind of a natural baseline, some kind of state of stationarity where we have equilibrium across the board, and these separated components inherently want to achieve this state of equilibrium, and that is what happens when you have all these separate components of nature, all seeking the natural baseline. So that's one form of separation. Another form of separation is the way humans perceive nature. we traditionally have perceived nature as being separate from us. We are not connected to nature. We are apart from nature. We're outside of nature. In fact, in many ways, we have presumed we are superior to nature. We can think through how to improve nature because we are superior beings and have the Homo sapien exceptionalism that allows us to basically use our brain power to be able to improve upon nature. But that's because we're separate from it. We actually look at it, and that has been a historic theme in terms of how humans have taken a look at nature. Not only are we separate from nature as humans, we're also separate from humans. We don't work together as humans. We are very separate individual entities that are only interested in our own well-being. We are not collaborative individuals. We are separate individuals, is another presumption that we've had. And not only are we separate as human beings, we are separate from our laws as well. Our laws are outside of us. In fact, our laws are to be given to authorities and agencies, and in a top-down system, the laws basically tell us what to do, or actually they tell us what not to do. It seems to be the way the laws work. And that's a form of separation as well too, which is I am simply doing what the law tells me to do because the law and the legal decision makers know better than I, and they tell me what I should do because I am separate from the laws. So that's one reality I think that we have been using for the last 60 plus years of environmental decision making, which is an algorithm based on separation. Number one is separation. Number two is what we seem to have done also is we seem to have decided that it's probably a good idea to continue to rely on neoclassical economics, traditional neoclassical economics. And neoclassical economics, which has been taught in colleges and universities for a century, essentially presumes that human beings are driven by their selfish desire to maximize their own utility, period. That's what drives us as human beings under neoclassical economics, is our desire to be selfish, welfare maximizing, utility maximizing, optimizing individuals, not collective group think individuals, but individually, I want to benefit myself. I don't care about the earth around me. I don't care about the rest of the people around me. I care about benefiting myself only. And let's use that reality of human beings to build laws. All right. If it turns out that's who human beings are, let's make sure our laws reflect the fact that people are going to act that way. And if people are going to act that way, then we can operate accordingly. We can pass laws that disincentivize individuals from acting selfishly. We can punish them if they act in a selfish way or something like that. So we've relied on this assumption about social utility and optimization reality and the desire to internalize the costs that are being imposed on others, and that will allow social benefit for all, and remove negative externalities and all that. And that has been the basis for our laws, and that's the second presumption. That's the second part of the algorithm, which is who we are. We are what the neoclassical economics professors tell us we have been, which is this selfish group of individuals who don't really care about the rest of humanity. The third part of the algorithm, at least according to my theory, is that we have had a particular assumption about science. And the science that we have presumed is the science that works and the proper role of science is what I call utilitarian science, which is essentially science that really does only one thing. It basically tells us what we are observing. It tells us, to use a compact phrase, it tells us what is out there. It tells us what is happening in the environment, what is happening in terms of what we are doing to the environment, cause and effect. Humans are doing X, the environment responds by Y. And when we know that, then we can come up with laws that mitigate or prevent what we are doing to harm the environment. And that's the only role of science, is to try to basically figure out what is, not anything beyond that. And science traditionally has not played much of a role in policy making. Policy making has been a separate issue. We leave that to legislators, politicians, policymakers. Science shouldn't play a role in terms of what we should do. That is a separate matter for exceptional humans. We don't rely on science for that. So there you have it. That's the algorithm that I think has been in place, driving our environmental laws: separation, neoclassical economics, and utilitarian science. So now the question is there a better algorithm out there? Are there other assumptions that may be more correct, may be more realistic in terms of how things work and how things do work, that maybe would produce better results? And my argument is the following. Well, yes, there is. Let's start with the first idea, which is separation. Separation is really not the way we should describe the reality of humans and nature and humans and nature. And in fact, the way I think we are pretty much conceding is reality now is that there is no such thing as nature operating in separate compartments to achieve some kind of natural baseline and equilibrium. Nature does not work that way. Nature is not seeking stationarity. Nature is not by itself working separately to magically arrive at this baseline. The way it works is that nature is something called a complex adaptive system. And as a complex adaptive system, nature is always interacting with nature. The components of nature all work together. And they are not only working together, they are not working in a unified fashion. They are constantly changing and adapting to change circumstances. And it is that fact of constant change that characterizes how nature operates. It is not something that is stationarity at all, or stationary. It is a very complex system that is changing, and that is what causes the health of the system. The actual change and the changes that take place as a response to stimulus is what causes a system to become stronger. Baselines, natural baselines, make us weaker. And nature, I think, in some ways understands that. I mean, this is not me thinking, this is what biologists basically assume. So we don't have separation, we have a complex adaptive system where nature and ecosystems work together, essentially. And of course, the second reality, which should be no surprise to anybody, is that humans are not separate from nature. Humans are part of nature. We are all integrated into nature. We are nature, and nature is us. And in fact, policymakers and academics have come up with a term to describe this connection, and it's called a social ecological system, an SES. A social ecological system is a system that basically has nature and humans work together as one entity. It's not separate between nature and humans, the environment and humans, which is what we traditionally assume to be the situation. No, we're all connected, and we connect constantly with our environment. environmental law is human law in some ways as well. So let's get rid of separation and add interconnection. Add the term that some folks use and I embrace is entanglement. Entanglement is a better description of humans, how humans relate to humans, and how humans relate to nature, and how nature relates to nature. It's entanglement seems to be a better description. And in fact, if you extend that to humans and law, I think we are beginning to realize that this top-down notion of legal decision-making may not be the most effective way to proceed. Perhaps it's a better way to include the individual decision-making and choice-making within a legal system. Allow humans more discretion in terms of how they are making decisions, as opposed to having it be some flat rule that is brought down upon us by some decision maker. So instead of having separation, let's have those that are being regulated, those that are the source of the problem, which are humans, be part of the solution, to use a cliche, and have the humans be more active in terms of being a participant in some legal issue. So let's get rid of separation and add instead entanglement or interconnection. Number two, this whole idea of neoclassical economics intuitively makes sense, but as I think most of us are aware of right now, there has been a lot more research among psychologists and economists who have come to the realization that those assumptions by neoclassical economists are not necessarily correct. That in fact, human beings are not always social optimizers, individual utility maximizers, and all that. And in fact, there's this brand new school that has emerged. It's not so new now, but it's called behavioral economics. This is the Daniel Kahneman idea that's been embraced by many other decision makers and scientists, which essentially debunk many of the assumptions that neoclassical economic professors have had, where we are not necessarily selfish, utility maximizers. In fact, we do collaborate. In fact, we do act altruistically. In fact, we do, as humans, have this notion of green behavior sometimes, where we want to actually do good by nature, even though we can't necessarily see our direct benefit as a result, because we want nature to be free of some of the ills that humans have bestowed upon it. And this behavior has been observed, it's real, and it is counter to what the neoclassical economists assume the way human beings operate. We do operate sometimes collectively, and we do operate in a way where we are seeking the best for not just me, but for others as well. And if that's the case, maybe the laws should tap into that, this behavior, which is again counterintuitive. We're not just selfish welfare maximizers, we also care about each other. And we are not just going through life solo. We are going through life with the world of people around us as well. And then finally, the final change we might be able to make is, well, why don't we change our idea about science? Maybe science should be more than just telling us about what is. Maybe we should expand the role of science to be more what should be. Instead of having that be a human policy-driven decision, maybe turn to science and ask science, well, what should be? And not ask humans to decide that, but ask science to decide that. And in my book and articles, I basically call that explanatory science, not utilitarian science, but explanatory science. And if we do turn to science to try to decide what should be, not just what is, which is what we traditionally do with science, but decide what should be, then how do we find that? How do we find out what that is? Well, one of the things that science can tell us is the following. And I think science has told us this as well, too. And that is that there is a principle out there that I call, and I'm not the only one who calls it, this is not my term, it's called the principle of universality, which essentially says there are some laws out there that are universal, that are basically so universal that they apply everywhere. They apply in the subatomic arena, and they apply in the, when you're dealing with galaxies. These laws are so universal that they apply not just anywhere, these laws apply anytime. They apply 1,000 years ago, they are going to apply 1,000 years in the future. They apply anytime and anywhere. And they are, but to meet the standard of being a universal law, they have to be laws that are predictable and that are laws that we can observe and laws that exist in any frame. Again, from the subatomic to the galactic, they apply and they certainly apply on planet Earth, and they certainly apply to our environment as well. And that's what science is telling us, is there are laws out there that are universal laws. And those laws we can call, or I call, the laws of nature, the laws of nature. So the question would then be, well, that sounds great in the abstract, but what the hell are these laws? I mean, are there laws out there that essentially are universal laws that apply everywhere? And if so, what are those laws? And I believe there are such laws, and I believe they are countable. They're not an infinite number of such laws. And I further think that if there are laws of nature that we can identify and take a look at, then perhaps what we have been missing in our environmental laws over the last 60 years is that our environmental laws have not been consistent with the universal laws of nature, because our laws of the environment that we teach in environmental law are in fact laws involving nature. And the argument that I make, and again, that's all it is an argument. The argument that I make is that should not our laws about nature reflect the laws of nature? All right. Should not our laws about nature, which is all our environmental laws, should not they also reflect the laws of nature? There you have it, Tracy. There's the bottom line. You can leave now. You can all leave now. You've got my theme right there. Okay. Should not the laws about nature, our environmental laws, reflect the laws of nature? And my argument, of course, is yes, they should. They should reflect the laws of nature. So now the question is, well, what are these laws of nature? And and again, this is way outside contracts and torts and property law. My understanding is the following. There are, in fact, 3 laws of nature that meet the test of the principle of universality, which means they have to apply everywhere. And if so, what are those 3 laws? And here they are. Law number 1, law of nature number 1. And again, environmental laws should conform to these laws. Law of nature number 1 is connection, not separation, connection. The default principle and assumption has got to be that things are basically connected, interconnected, entangled. They are not separated, they are entangled. Whether we're talking about humans and humans, humans and nature, nature and nature, components of nature, it's all interconnected. And so when we look at nature, things are not separate. They are all interconnected. Galaxy A in the universe is somehow connected also to Galaxy B. And when you go to the subatomic world and the world of quantum mechanics, we can see connections as well in that world, surprisingly. And we certainly can see connections in the environment. And that's almost intuitive at this point. Everything we do to the environment, no matter how innocuous, is connected to everything else. And there will be an effect. There will be an effect. When I breathe carbon dioxide out, it doesn't just disappear into the universe. It actually goes into our atmosphere and becomes part of the carbon dioxide that is now, inexorably, gradually increasing on this planet. It's all connected. Everything we do is connected to everything else. So that's principle number one, is connection. Principle number two is called, it's really called the principle of parsimony, or the principle of economy, or sometimes, if you want to be really fancy, it's called Occam's razor, which essentially means that when you're trying to understand a complex system or even a complex problem, usually the simplest solution and the simplest way of looking at something is the correct way. It's not as complex as you think. And in fact, there's even a theory called chaos theory, which basically presumes that even in chaos, you can find some simple rules that are driving the chaotic stream of events that seem to be completely random. There are, in fact, certain regularities that take place within, and predictive regularities that occur within chaos. So the second principle and the second law of nature would be simplicity, not complexity, but simplicity. Less is more. The more simple a system is, the more likely it is to be successful. So we have connection and we have simplicity. And then the final law of nature, which is to me the most interesting of one of all, and one that I certainly don't consider myself expert in, but it seems to be implanted in everybody who looks into this topic. The third and final law of nature is symmetry. Symmetry governs virtually everything that describes nature. And there's all kinds of different ways of looking at symmetry, but symmetry is in fact a recurring reality when it comes to how we look at nature. And symmetry is a way, furthermore, for us to predict how things are going to be. There's some argument that Einstein was able to predict the general theory of relativity by using the principles of symmetry to basically figure out how it would work when he was putting together his two important principles. So symmetry would be another example of a universal law that you find everywhere. And let me just give you two quick examples about symmetry, which I like, because it makes sense, and I can even understand it. Example number one of symmetry is the following, and that is, have you ever wondered why a honeybee always, wherever the honeybee is, always makes a honeycomb using the same shape, always? And what is that shape? It's a hexagon, a symmetrical hexagon. Now, why does a honeybee, without being taught by the queen bee to do so, always uses a hexagon, which is a symmetrical six-sided object? And the answer, as it turns out, which has now been mathematically proved, is that hexagon, as opposed to a circle or a triangle or a square or a rectangle, the hexagon is the one shape which allows the honeybee to produce the maximum amount of honey, or hold the maximum amount of honey with the least amount of wax. Just imagine that. And the honeybee can figure that out, or at least by evolutionary reality, they figured it out. And it's symmetry, essentially. Symmetry rules. The same is true with a snowflake, a six-sided snowflake. The same is true if you take a look at the symmetry inside of a sunflower. I didn't understand this until recently, but if you look at a sunflower, the way the sunflower unfolds is by using a series of Fibonacci numbers around the spirals of the sunflower. And why does the sunflower use Fibonacci numbers to figure out the placement of seeds around the sunflower in a symmetrical fashion? And the answer is that is the most efficient way to have the most seeds in a spiral situation, in a spiral shape, is using Fibonacci numbers. And the sunflower knows how to do it, at least over millions of years. Evolutionary changes ensured that those sunflowers that use Fibonacci numbers were the ones who were going to survive. And then you go to the other side of size and go to the galaxies. We now begin to think that our galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, is perfectly symmetrical. The arms of our galaxy, the two arms of our galaxy, mirror each other, mirror symmetry. And they do it not by chance, but because symmetry rules everything. So anyway, there you have it. There are the laws of nature, which is connection, symmetry, and simplicity. Now, let's conclude. If that's true, then what should our laws look like? What should our environmental laws look like? If we want to have that, reflect the laws, the three laws of nature. All right, well, number one, they need to connect. The laws need to connect us. They need to connect us to the issue we're trying to address. They need to connect humans to humans, and humans to nature, and humans to the law itself. And the other thing the laws need to do is they need to be symmetrical, and the laws would also need to be simple. So by the way, are our environmental laws simple right now? The answer is no. Oh, no. We have the most complex set of environmental laws that I think a human being could ever imagine. I mean, you take a look at environmental law case books, textbooks, horn books, what have you. They're thousands of pages long, very difficult to figure out. We don't have a simple system of environmental laws in this country or other countries as well. So we should simplify things. So how do you do that? How do you simplify and connect and employ symmetry? Well, my argument in my book and in my articles is the following. Let's come up with and adopt a reciprocal right-duty dichotomy. Right-duty dichotomy, very much like a John Locke, Immanuel Kant system, where we basically use right and duty as what our laws are going to be. We're going to keep it simple. We're going to bestow a right, and we're going to impose a duty. That's it. Create a right and impose a duty, and nothing more than that. We're not going to have 20,000 pages of administrative regulations. It's going to be a right-duty dichotomy. A duty is the symmetrical corollary of a right. So we meet the test of symmetry. So it's simple and it's symmetrical. And if we have a right and a duty, then does it meet the test of connection? Well, it depends on what the right and the duty is. And what my proposed right would be is, let's do the following. Let's give a right to not humans. We do have a right now in many states where you have a right to a clean environment, but it's always given to humans. Humans have a right to a clean environment. Why not, instead of giving the right to a clean environment to humans, why not give it to the SES? Why not give it to the humans, nature, social ecological system? So that system has a right, and the right would be the right of basically sustainability. The right would be to create, to ensure that the system allows the SES to continue, essentially. It's a right of sustainability to the SES. And it's not just humans, it's the ecological side has a right to exist as well too. So we are giving a right to humans and nature combined as an SES, and either one can raise the right to the sustainability and the continuation of an SES on this planet. Because if we don't have an SES, we don't have humans, and we will definitely have a different system than we've ever had before on this planet without or at least without humans. We're not going to have a human-based system anymore. So we want to keep humans around selfishly. So let's have an SES right. So that the right would be to a continuation of conditions that allow us to have, I think the term would be a safe space for the continuation of the SES, or a safe space for humanity. And then the duty would be a duty imposed not on nature, because nature doesn't give a damn what duties we impose on it, but the duty is imposed on humans. And the duty imposed on humans is to ensure that you take actions to continue the SES, our social ecological system here. A duty continued the SES, and that is only imposed on the human component of the SES, because you can't impose a duty on nature, and that's it. That is create a right, impose a duty. And when you do those two, simple, symmetrical, and they're connected, because they're connected to, we're connecting nature and humans, and we're connecting them directly to the law itself, then maybe we have not just a different algorithm, maybe we have a different result altogether. And I think my time is up. Am I correct, Ray? I think I am.
I think you have timed it just about perfectly. We have about 5 to 6 minutes left for our session. And first of all, thank you for a fascinating and very stimulating discussion. It's very, not the usual sort of legalistic talk that we have.
No, it is not. No, it is not.
So with that, we do have some questions in the chat. Let me go ahead and see if I can kick things off by asking perhaps a more practical question, which is, I think what you'll find is that a lot of folks will find this idea intriguing, but translating it into something that actually governs day-to-day activity is hard to visualize. So can you give us an example beyond an investment of a right and a corresponding obligation? What would, for example, a climate law look like if it was going to be, or assuming a climate law is appropriate, maybe you just need to have something even more simple and more broad-reaching. But if there was a climate law, how would it reflect the 3 principles that you're talking about? I mean, do we go from the 1,000-page Waxman-Markey bill down to a 1-page statement of principles of investing rights in the climate system?
Well, I mean, that's an excellent question. The laws themselves are don't exist, because there's only 2 laws in my system. The law of we are given rights to the SES, and then we also are imposing a duty. Those are the only laws out there. We're not going to create some kind of a climate change system. We are going to drive climate change from the bottom up, essentially. We are going to have either humans or nature raising the rights of nature to ensure that that which is causing climate change is abated in some fashion. And so we are actually empowering the SES to whatever it takes to reduce those activities that are producing the damage to the climate. So there is not a creation of a law. The law is already in place. It's a very simple law. It's a right duty law, and we don't have an overlay of some great administrative scheme unless as a result of requiring those activities that are producing the harm to or producing the changes to the climate. if they need some guidance by way of some administrative guidance to get the job done, maybe we can create that. But what's driving the change is the SES under my system is saying, I have a right to sustainability. You are denying me that right. You now must change. And it's just, it's an enforceable right that is now being imposed. Now, you probably are not going to rely on courts to do that. You probably need some administrative apparatus to pull it off. But I am not assuming we need to have a complex, big statutory, multi-page system to pull that off, because that just produces more complexity, which stops everything.
Thank you. And this may be a correlated question in the same spirit, and hopefully I'm not going to terribly mangle our questioner's name, but Sanju Dinapanre has asked whether or not this might be a concept that is perhaps suited for changes to national constitutional rights, and sort of putting it in sort of an aspirational, larger system as a ground right principle that would drive laws. And this sort of it sounds like a similar spirit you're talking about, but it also sounds like constitutions are just a legal version of the same sort of principles that maybe don't capture what you're getting at.
Well, that's a very good point, which is what's going to be the source of the right and the duty. And I think if you wanted to be serious about it, it would actually be not by way of a statute or by way of some judge-driven common law creation. It would be part of a constitution, essentially. It would be, we could amend our constitution to have something like that be embedded within it. I mean, of course, that's pie in the sky stuff that would not occur unless we were really in a bad way in terms of our environment here. But I think ultimately that's right. If we are serious about our survivability and our existence, it would probably require us to basically change our constitutions. And the United States Constitution has the ability to be amended to, in fact, reflect exactly what I am proposing right now. And I did not make that argument in my book or article, but boy, that sounds like a great idea. Thank you.
And it sounds like they may have some interesting parallels as well in international law development and customary international law. Although, again, it's sort of how to translate as opposed to the root principles you're getting at.
Yeah, international law, I completely agree. That's the best way to accomplish this, not just American law. Correct.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. And Aubin, you'd actually asked the first question in the chat. I was wondering if you'd like to ask your question, and then we can go ahead and wrap up. Oh, go ahead and wrap up. All right. Well, and that's probably makes sense because it is now 9:58. So with the final 90 seconds, any final thoughts you'd like to offer, Jan, before we conclude?
No, I appreciate your willingness to listen to me and hear me out. And I enjoy passing my thoughts on to you. And the book is published by Edward Elgar, and it is called Rethinking Environmental Law. I think it's been out for 1 month right now. This article by George Washington will be published, I believe, at the end of this month or the beginning of December, and it's pretty much the same ideas. And I, like so many others, we're just trying to see if is there another way that may be more successful than the ways we have been trying, which don't seem to be working for some reason.
Well, and I'll gently remind everybody on the call that the flyer announcing Jan's talk has a link to his book, so you can order your own copy. So with that, thanks again to everybody for joining our talk this month. Aubin, I'll pass the baton to you to remind everyone about next month's talk. But I just want to say personally, as always, it's a great pleasure to talk with John. I hope we get a chance, Jan, to talk again if you're going to Vail for the Rocky Mountain Marine Law Foundation meeting next summer. I may very well be doing that. Yes, in person, an actual physical meeting, which is a strange. That would be nice. That would be very nice. And everyone else, thank you very much for joining us on our call today. And Aubin, the baton's yours to wrap things up. Yes. Next speaker is Professor Lisa Sachs from Columbia University on the role of international investment law for natural resources and climate. And it will be on November 22nd. All right. Then thanks again, everyone. We'll see you next month. Take care.